Hello? I'm really excited to talk with you all today. I hope you are ready to hear about something close to my heart, my own English learning experience when I was in the U.S. Let me share my story. When I first moved to the U.S., I already knew a little bit of English. I could understand some words, and I knew how to say hello and thank you. But when I got there, I realized that English in real life was so different from what I had learned in my home country. I arrived at the airport in New York, and it was so busy. So many people were talking, and everyone seemed to be in a hurry. A man at the counter asked me where I was going next. I didn't understand him right away because he spoke so fast. I felt a little embarrassed, but I asked him to speak slowly. He smiled and said it again. "Where are you going?" This time I understood. "I am going to Boston," I said, carefully pronouncing each word. For me, that was the first lesson. People are kind, and if you don't understand something, you can ask them to slow down. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Sometimes we feel shy because we don't want to look like we don't know what we are doing. But I learned very quickly that making mistakes is okay, and that asking for help is important. When I arrived in Boston, everything felt new. The streets were new, the buildings were different from my home country, the weather was colder, and of course, everyone was speaking English. I remember going to a small cafe thinking I could order a coffee by myself. I had practiced saying, "Can I have a coffee, please?" I was ready. But when I got to the counter, the woman asked me, "What kind of coffee do you want?" I was confused. I didn't know that there were different kinds of coffee. I stood there for a second without saying anything. The woman smiled and tried to help me. She said, "Do you want black coffee, or do you want it with milk and sugar?" It took me a moment, but I understood her. I was relieved. I said, "With milk, please." And she gave me my coffee with a nice smile. This little experience taught me something very important. You don't need to know everything at once. You just need to know how to express your basic needs, and then people will help you with the rest. Don't be afraid if you don't understand something right away. It happens to everyone. After I got my coffee, I decided to walk around the city. People were very friendly. Some of them smiled and said, "Have a nice day." But I didn't know how to answer that at the time. I would just smile back, feeling a little shy. I didn't know that "have a nice day" was just a friendly thing people say. A few days later, I asked a friend, "People keep telling me to have a nice day. What am I supposed to say back?" My friend laughed and said, "You can just say thank you, or you too." That was another important lesson for me. English has many small phrases like "have a nice day" or "how's it going?" These are not questions that need big answers. They are a way people talk to each other to be nice. When someone asks you, "How's it going?" you don't need to explain your whole day. You can just say, "I'm good, thanks," and then ask them, "How are you?" It took me a while to get used to little things like that, but I started speaking more and more with people. I remember going to a grocery store and hearing all these different English phrases as people spoke to the cashier. I would listen carefully and try to pick up new words. Slowly, I got more comfortable. Then I started taking English classes in the U.S. I met people from all over the world. People from Korea, Japan, Brazil, Spain, and so many other places. We were all trying to learn English together. At first, it was scary. I didn't want to speak in front of everyone because I thought they might laugh if I made mistakes. But the truth is, they were just like me. They also felt shy, and they also made mistakes. In the end, we were all learning together. One of my classmates was a girl named Anna. She was from Brazil, and she shared with me that she felt nervous every time the teacher asked a question. "I know the words in my head," she said, But when I try to speak, I get scared. I told her, I feel the same way, but the only way to get better is to keep trying. So Anna and I promised each other that we would practice together. We would meet at a little park after school, and we would practice talking in English. Sometimes we would speak too fast and forget a word, but it was okay because we helped each other. We would laugh at our mistakes and try again, and little by little, it became easier. After a few months, Anna felt more confident in class, and so did I. That's another important part of learning English. Find friends who are learning too. Practice with them and don't worry about getting everything right. It's fun when you can practice with someone who understands your journey. Anna and I would speak in English when we went to cafés and bookstores, and every time we ordered something, we felt a little more confident. One of the funniest moments I remember happened when I was trying to ask for directions to a museum. I wanted to see some art, and I wasn't sure where the museum was. I asked a passerby, "Excuse me, where is the museum?" But because of my accent, the man didn't understand me. He thought I was asking for a moose, the big animal with antlers. He looked at me confused and said, "There are no moose around here." We both laughed, and I repeated the word carefully. No, I mean museum." Finally, he understood, and he gave me the directions. I learned that saying words slowly and carefully can really help. Practice pronouncing tough words again and again. If you slow down and take your time, people will understand you better. Through all of this, my confidence grew a lot. I practiced talking every day, and things became easier. At first, I was scared of phone calls because I couldn't see the person's face, and it was harder to understand over the phone. But I forced myself to make phone calls in English, even if it was scary. I would call a restaurant to make a reservation or call a store to ask if they sold something. It was tough, but it made me stronger. There's a saying I really liked during my time in the U.S. Practice makes perfect. Of course, nobody is truly perfect, but the idea is that the more you practice, the better you get. It's not about making no mistakes. It's about learning from every mistake and improving every day. I also learned that learning English in real life is very different from learning it in a classroom. In school, they taught us grammar, and that was helpful. But when you are living in a country where everyone speaks English, you have to use the language in many different ways. You have to speak, listen, read, and write every day. This is why practice is so important. I remember feeling so proud the first time I had a full conversation with someone without needing help. It was a simple conversation about the weather with my neighbor, but I understood everything she said. I was able to reply, and she smiled and said, "Your English is getting really good." That little moment made a big difference for me. So here's my advice for you if you are learning English. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Everyone does. Find fun ways to practice, whether it's with a friend, watching TV shows, or listening to music in English. The more you practice, the easier it will get. You might feel scared at first, but every day will bring new surprises. Remember the story of my Brazilian friend Anna and how we helped each other? You can find someone to practice with too. Laugh at the mistakes, help each other, and keep getting better. If I can learn English in a busy place like the US, you can definitely do it too. And one last thing. Always remember, learning a new language is an adventure. It's not just about speaking some new words, but also about meeting new people, understanding new cultures, and seeing the world in a new way. Keep going on this journey. You can do it. My journey of learning English at the gym. I want to tell you a little story about my time learning English at the gym in Boston. This story will help you understand how I practiced English in a real situation. I hope my story can motivate you. and you'll see that learning English step by step is possible even in places you might not expect. So, when I moved to Boston, my English wasn't perfect. I knew enough to get by, but sometimes I was nervous to speak. And do you know what one of the hardest places to practice English was for me? It was the gym. Yes, the gym. I know, talking in the gym doesn't seem that important, right? But a lot of people talk there, even more than you think. I wanted to make friends and learn from people, but speaking English was a challenge at first. On my first day at the gym in Boston, I met a guy named Jake. Jake was a regular gym goer, and he was very nice. When I bumped into him by the water fountain, I decided to say, "Hi." He smiled and said, "Hey, how's it going?" Now, I didn't know exactly how to answer this because in my old country, people don't ask this question often. I quickly said, "Good. And you?" And that was good enough for him. He replied, "Not bad." That's how I learned a short way to answer, "How's it going?" just by speaking to Jake that day. Now, there's something funny. Each time I saw him, Jake would stop and ask something new. He didn't talk too fast, but it still made me nervous because I didn't know many gym words, like treadmill, lifting weights, or sets. One day, Jake asked me, "What's your workout routine like?" And I totally froze. I smiled but had no idea what workout routine meant back then. I asked him, "What is a routine?" He explained that it's a set of exercises or activities you do regularly. From that one conversation, I started using new words like exercise, lifting, and stretching, and they became easier over time. Another time, after the gym, I was trying to follow an online workout plan, but the instructions were all in English. I had to stop and look up every third word. Words like plank, squat, and lunges seemed like alien words to me at first. It wasn't fun at the beginning, but instead of quitting, I wrote down all these new words and repeated them to myself every day, even when I wasn't at the gym. Repetition was key. Over time, something amazing happened. I started to get more comfortable, and even though my sentences weren't perfect, I used the words I knew. And as I did this, my confidence grew. I began to understand more from listening to other people around me. I'll tell you a simple story about this. Once, I overheard two women in the gym locker room talk about their workout schedules. One of them said, "Today's cardio, then yoga tomorrow." I repeated those words in my head, cardio and yoga. Then, when I went to the front desk to ask about class schedules, I used the same words. I said, "Is there yoga tomorrow?" It was a small victory for me because I learned those words just by listening. The receptionist told me, "Yes, there's yoga at 9 a.m." And I felt proud because not only did I understand her, but I also used what I learned that day. Then came another challenge. People in Boston, especially in the gym, sometimes talk fast. It's not always easy to catch all their words, and they use a lot of casual phrases. So, I practiced asking people to repeat themselves. I started saying, "Can you say that again slowly, please?" No one ever got upset with me. In fact, most people were patient. They repeated their words slowly for me, and I learned faster because I was brave enough to ask. The thing with learning English at the gym is that I wasn't always talking about big things. We didn't always discuss long sentences. Simple questions like, "How many sets today?" or "Are you using this machine next?" were the ones that helped me the most to interact. The vocabulary I needed was mostly short, everyday words, but it was enough to make me feel like I belonged. One of my proudest moments was this one day when another regular gym member, Julie, saw me doing push-ups. She came over and said, "Wow, you've improved." I was so happy just to understand, but I also felt confident to reply, "Thanks, I've been practicing." We had a quick chat about fitness goals. Little did I know, it was also an English lesson for me. Slowly, I realized something. The more I engaged in these short conversations, the better I got. Whether it was 3 words or 10, it didn't matter. It all helped. As a beginner, my advice to you is this. Train your English muscles like how you train your body. You don't become strong in one day, and you won't become fluent overnight. But every time you use a new word or try to say another sentence, that's like lifting another weight. It's going to get easier for you, I promise. And yes, you might struggle at first, like I did when I couldn't understand terms like core strength or reps. But every time you make an effort, you're growing. When someone teaches you new words, write them down and say them again and again, even to yourself. Soon, you'll be proud of how much you know. After some months, I started being the one who asked quick questions like, "What workout are you doing today?" And, "Do you want to run on the treadmill with me?" It felt like a small victory each time I finished a conversation without stumbling. The gym, in a way, was like a classroom for me. Every lesson didn't come from a book, but it came from real-life moments. Maybe you're not going to a gym, but you can talk to someone in any place, a store, the park, a bus stop. The important thing is to keep trying, like I did in Boston. So, looking back, my English learning experience at the gym was not just about new words, but about confidence. You can learn English anywhere if you look for small chats, short sentences, and everyday moments. Take this as your little reminder. It's okay to make mistakes. The only way you won't learn is by not speaking. Believe me, I wanted to hide sometimes when I made mistakes. But over time, the people around me supported me because they could see I was trying. All right, you have to remember to be brave when learning English. It can be tough sometimes, like lifting weights, but each day you practice, it will get easier. Just like I got stronger lifting weights at the gym, you will get better at English with each word you speak. Keep believing in yourself, and don't be afraid to ask, "What did you mean by that?" Or, "Can you speak slower?" That's how we grow. Good things come with time and effort. Keep going. You're doing amazing already for wanting to learn, and I'm proud of you. At the supermarket, restaurant, and parties, I'm so happy to share another part of my story. After learning how to speak a little better in the gym, I noticed that the places where I most needed English were the everyday places I visited, like the supermarket, restaurants, and even when I went to parties. Let me tell you about these experiences because they really helped me get better at speaking English. I want to start with the supermarket. When I first moved to a new country, even something simple like going to the supermarket was challenging. I remember walking in for the first time. The lights were bright, and the shelves were so big, bigger than the stores where I'm from. I needed to buy some basics, vegetables, bread, and maybe something for breakfast the next day. The problem was, I didn't know where anything was, or how to ask for help. I remember I walked around for a long time looking for the milk. I knew the word milk, but I didn't know how to ask someone where it was. So, I just wandered around the aisles. Finally, I saw a worker near one of the shelves. I was too shy to speak at first because I didn't know how to ask the question correctly, but I knew I had to try. I walked up to them and said, "Milk, where?" It wasn't a perfect sentence, but they understood. The worker smiled and pointed me to the correct aisle, and I said, "Thank you." I was so happy that I managed to communicate, even with my limited English. Every time I went to the supermarket, I started learning new words by reading the signs. On the shelves, I would see words like dairy, frozen, baked goods, and I started to understand what they meant. I also practiced phrases to ask for help, like, "Excuse me, do you know where the bread is?" Or, Can you tell me where the sugar is? These small sentences helped me interact more. Little by little, the fear of speaking disappeared. I became more confident. One time, I couldn't find tomatoes. I walked up to a staff member and bravely asked, "Excuse me, where are the tomatoes?" The staff member smiled again and said, "In the produce aisle." I had no idea what produce meant, but I still followed her and found the tomatoes. Afterward, I wrote down the word produce and looked it up later. I learned that produce means fresh fruits and vegetables. The best part? Now, I always know where to find fresh items in any supermarket. It's funny how these small conversations can teach you so much. I remember coming home one day after the supermarket and telling myself, I can do this. The more I practiced, the easier it became to ask for what I needed. Now, when I go to the store, I never get lost. If I can't find something, I just ask. It feels good to be able to communicate. Now, let's move on to the restaurant. Ordering food at a restaurant felt really hard the first time I tried. I was with my friends and everyone was speaking English. I couldn't understand the full menu. Of course, I knew what pizza and pasta were, but there were so many other words like appetizer, entree, side dish that I didn't know yet. When the waiter came and asked, "Are you ready to order?" I felt so nervous. Everyone spoke so quickly and I couldn't keep up. But I wanted to eat, so I had to say something. I pointed to the dish on the menu that I wanted and said slowly, but confidently, "This, please." The waiter nodded and said, "Would you like anything else?" I didn't know what else to say, so I just said, "No, thank you." I sounded a little unsure of myself, but it worked. I got my food, and the waiter understood me. That was the important part. Then another thing happened. I noticed that my friends ordered more than just food. They asked for drinks, too. I didn't know how to ask for a drink in the right way. One of my friends asked for a soda and said, "Can I have a Coke, please?" That taught me the polite way to ask for something in a restaurant. So the next time, when the waiter asked what I wanted to drink, I said, "Can I have a glass of water, please?" It felt amazing to say a full sentence in English. As I went to restaurants more often, I started to learn more useful phrases. I learned how to order by saying, "I'll have the pasta," or "Can I have the chicken sandwich?" I even learned how to ask about the menu. Sometimes I didn't know what something was on the menu, so I would ask, "What is this dish?" That way, the waiter could explain what the food was, and I could understand better. After practicing these phrases over and over again, ordering food became much easier for me. I began to love going to restaurants because it was an opportunity to learn new words and practice speaking to someone in a real-life situation. Every time the waiter came, it was like a small test, and every time I ordered successfully, it was a victory. Now, I never feel nervous when I go out to eat. I can even ask specific things like, "Can I have extra cheese on that?" Or, "Is the soup spicy?" It's almost like an adventure, trying new foods and learning new English words at the same time. Now let me tell you about going to parties. Oh boy, parties were the hardest. When you go to a party, there's so much talking, and everyone speaks quickly because they're excited and having fun. I remember my first big party when I moved here. I didn't know anyone, and I was scared because I wasn't sure if I could keep a conversation going in English. At the start of the party, I stood in the corner, quietly holding my drink. I felt a bit out of place. But then, someone walked toward me and introduced themselves. "Hey, I'm Mike. What's your name?" It was a simple question, and I knew the answer, of course. I smiled nervously and said, My name. Nice to meet you." We shook hands, and that's how I started my first conversation at the party. Then Mike asked me, "How do you know the host?" Which means the person who invited us to the party. I didn't know how to answer in a perfect sentence, so I said something very short. We work together. He smiled and said, "Cool," and introduced me to more people. I felt a little more comfortable, but I still didn't speak too much. Everyone else spoke fast, and sometimes I missed their jokes or didn't understand their slang. That's when I learned another helpful sentence. I started saying, "Can you say that again, please?" Or, "Sorry, I didn't catch that." People were always so kind. They would repeat what they said, slower this time, and I felt included. It really helped me because it showed that it's okay not to understand everything at once. Every time someone repeated something for me, it felt like another small lesson. As I went to more parties, I learned more questions I could ask people like, "Where do you live?" or "What do you do for work?" Simple, easy questions that started conversations. I realized that you don't need to talk a lot at parties. Just a few friendly questions are enough to make friends and practice your English. Over time, I became more comfortable at these events and even started laughing at jokes. Sometimes I didn't get them, but at least I understood most of what they were saying. So, whether it's in the supermarket, a restaurant, or at a party, English is something you can use every day. You don't have to be perfect, and you don't need big, fancy words. The key is to start with the basics: small phrases, simple requests, and everyday questions. You'll be surprised how much you can learn just by being open to speaking, even if you're unsure. Remember, learning English is a journey. It doesn't happen overnight. Some days you will speak fluently, and other days you may feel stuck. That's totally normal. The important thing is to keep trying, just like I did. If you keep practicing, soon you'll be going to restaurants and parties with confidence, just like me. You've got this. Just take it step by step and never be afraid to make a mistake. Each mistake brings you closer to success. Stay brave and keep learning, my friend.